Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we are going to be discussing photosynthesis and cell respiration. These are two processes that are extremely important for plants and animals, and we teach them together because they're basically cyclical. So that's really one of the big ideas of this. So whatever goes into photosynthesis is what comes out of respiration. Whatever goes into respiration is what comes out of photosynthesis. So you'll see what I mean as we go through these notes. Alright, so the first thing we want to look at is photo. So photosynthesis, you break it down, the word photo means light, and synthesis is to make. So the meaning of photosynthesis is to make food with light, or to make using light. When we go through this, there are certain things that all plants need, and then there are things that plants give off. So there are needs and then there are wastes. So when we do this, we also want to look at the chemical formulas, so the symbols that mean what each of the molecules are. So when we look at it, water, you guys should be familiar with that water is H2O. You should be familiar that oxygen, you should at least know that it's O, but oxygen technically is O2. Carbon dioxide you probably have heard before, which is CO2, and then glucose is probably new. Glucose is a sugar. But its chemical formula is C6H12O6. Alright? So that's a little bit bigger molecule. So you notice that each of those have numbers attached to them. So what those numbers in the chemical symbols, those stand for the number of atoms in each molecule. So for example, when you have C6H12O6, there are 6 atoms of carbon, which is the C. You have 12 atoms of hydrogen, which is the H, and then 6 atoms of oxygen. Okay, so the number always comes after the letter, and it's always going to be down on the bottom. So that means each individual atom. If there's no number attached to the number, or attached to the letter, no number attached to the letter, okay, that means that it's one atom. Okay, so for example, H2O, there's 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. Okay, CO2, there's 1 atom of carbon, 2 atoms of oxygen. Okay, so that's what we mean by that. Alright, so what type of organisms perform photosynthesis? Well, you know that plants go through photosynthesis. Okay, you also may not know that some single-celled organisms also perform photosynthesis. When we talk about protists, either the end of next week or the beginning of the following week, you'll see some single-celled organisms that actually go through photosynthesis. They will be green, and you will know you'll be able to see the chloroplast, which is actually where photosynthesis takes place. Alright, so in a single-celled organism, they have chloroplast. That's where the photosynthesis takes place. The chloroplast, as we know, is a specialized organelle that absorbs sunlight. Then it takes in some other things. And the whole point of photosynthesis is to produce food for the plant. An added bonus is that it gives us oxygen. Alright, but that's not the purpose of the plant going through photosynthesis. It needs to go through photosynthesis in order to get it food for itself. Alright, so when we look at the chemical equation for photosynthesis, we need to know what water, or what plants need. Okay, so one thing they definitely need is carbon dioxide. Okay, we know that plants also need water. And we also know that they need sunlight. Sunlight is kind of like the catalyst to this reaction. Once sunlight is present, that means that this whole reaction can take place. So this just means that plants take in carbon dioxide, they take in water, and they use sunlight to create glucose, and then they give off oxygen as a waste. So when we write this out, it would just be carbon dioxide plus water. And then using sunlight makes glucose. Okay, glucose is the sugar, the C6H12O6 plus oxygen. Okay, so there is one more component which we're not really going to stress. This is really what I want you to know. Know that carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight makes glucose and oxygen. Okay, so this is really the important part. But I don't like to give you just kind of half stuff, so I do want to make you aware that every chemical equation has to be balanced. Okay, and what that means is that there has to be equal number of elements on each side of the equation. Okay, so if you look over on this side, you have 6 carbons, but over here there's only 1. So what you have to do is you have to balance that, and by doing that they put a number in front of it, okay, to make sure it's all balanced. So really, this is the actual equation. You will not have to know the chemical equation for photosynthesis or respiration. I just want to make you aware of it. I think it's important, so this way when you do see it later on, and when you do need to know it, it won't be quite as foreign. From teaching high school, I know that a lot of kids have trouble when they haven't heard it or seen it for a while. So just kind of want to give you a little bit of background. But this is the only thing that you really have to know, is that take carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight, and they make glucose and oxygen, and glucose is the food, and oxygen is actually a waste product, which is to our benefit. Alright, so that's an overview of photosynthesis. Next we're going to look at cell respiration. So based on photosynthesis, we know that it produces glucose and oxygen, and we know that glucose is a carbohydrate, it's a sugar, and this is used as a source of energy. So we eat food, our bodies break it down, we actually use the sugar to make energy. Plants do this as well as animal cells. Okay, we all go through cell respiration. We know that it takes place in the mitochondria. Okay, and if you remember what the mitochondria does, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's where all the energy is made, and that's why we go through cell respiration, because we need to get energy, and energy in cells is ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. So when we look at the chemical formula for respiration, I'd mentioned earlier that these two equations basically form a cycle. Okay, so you're going to take whatever photosynthesis makes, which we know is glucose and oxygen, okay, and it's going to make whatever goes into photosynthesis. So we have carbon dioxide, water, and we also get ATP, which is energy. Okay, so this is your chemical formula, so you just need to know that you take glucose plus oxygen and you get carbon dioxide plus water plus energy, which is in the form of ATP. Alright, so, and again, all these equations need to be balanced, so you're just going to put 6's there, and again, this is the actual chemical equation. You will not need to know that. This is what you need to know. Glucose plus oxygen makes carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So carbon dioxide gets released as a gas, water gets released as a vapor, and then we use the energy in the cells to perform all the cellular functions. So there's two major types of cell respiration. Alright, you have aerobic respiration, which requires oxygen. So that's why you have the oxygen here. So this chemical formula is for aerobic respiration. Think of aerobics. You're doing exercises. You actually need to take in oxygen to be able to make energy. There are also some organisms that don't need oxygen to perform cell respiration, and that's called anaerobic respiration. So a lot of this are different types of bacteria, and they live in places where there's not a lot of oxygen to be found. So they'll go through something called anaerobic respiration. Your muscles will actually go through anaerobic respiration as well if you're doing too much physical activity and you can't get enough oxygen in. That's why you'll start to cramp up and you'll feel the burning in your muscles, and they'll start to cramp. It's actually lactic acid building up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we go through the human body. You guys will actually experience it in the classroom in a pretty cool activity called the Couch Potato Olympics. And one example of anaerobic respiration is fermentation. So you may know that fermentation is how alcohol is made, and that's an example of anaerobic respiration. It's the bacteria breaking down and forming energy without the help of oxygen. All right, so fermentation is a process that helps produce alcohol and a few other things. So those are your overviews of respiration and photosynthesis. You'll be able to experience how this is more cyclical in the investigation that you guys will be doing on Friday. You'll actually be using the iPads and going on and actually creating a experiment to perform. Then you get to see the results, and you'll be able to see how respiration and photosynthesis really have to balance each other out to help make the world really stay alive, because without these two processes, no life would be able to exist. So that's about it for today. Hasn't been too long, so make sure if you're watching this Wednesday night, make sure you study for your quiz tomorrow, and if you're watching it Thursday night, hope you did well on the quiz and be ready for one of your inquiry labs on Friday. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.